I'm Professor Sports Cards, and on today's episode of PSA Pop Counts, well, we go over all this. So grab a snack, hit the like button, subscribe, grow the channel. Time to study the market. You can see here all the different years of Prism and probably the top player card released that year. Let's take a deep dive and find out the nuances of the last decade in Prism and where it's going to go in the future together. As we go over it, here's the 2021 All-Star Game. So we're going to start at the beginning of Prism. Topps hadn't produced a set. There's no refractors or a chrome base set out there, and Prism comes out. And maybe not right in 2012, but in the near future, Prism becomes a hit. And it's the #1 selling basketball product and the leader in the NBA market for sports cards. Here's a good article by Card Lines. It reads, Prism was released in 2012 as part of Panini's promise to provide innovative improvements to the sports card hobby. As Panini put it, the hobby was long overdue for an upgrade. They go on to say that the Silver Prism cards are in all Prism products and have become any modern player's single most iconic rookie card. This is pretty true. A PSA 10 Silver Prism is as good as it gets for a long-term investment for a non-number card. That's arguable or debatable. So we're going to start with Anthony Davis. That's the rookie season Anthony Davis, as well as the rookie year or first year of Panini Prism Basketball 2012. And you can see here he has 2,700 copies graded, almost 2,800. 1,600 so being in a PSA 10 going for $200. That's the current price start of 2023. Keep in mind as we're going, what we're looking for is to compare or to see, 2012 throughout the years. The fact is it's 2023 and Anthony Davis has not been healthy for 3 years. You could argue his whole career, and I believe his price is more of a reflection on how he's been playing rather than the scarcity or it being the first year of Prism. Now take that for what it is. That's an opinion. What's fact is there's 1,600 of these graded. It's going for $200 at a 10. There's 2,800 almost total graded. And you can see the 9 is easily gettable at $45. So that's what we can tell, or those are the facts. Everything else is just kind of my opinion on NBA and where his card stands and why it's here at the moment. So that leads us to our next player, and he's the other big player in the 2012 NBA draft, and that's Kawhi Leonard. And it's kind of funny because since he's won the championship in Toronto, he hasn't been on the court in LA, so you could almost say the same thing about him that I did about Anthony Davis. However, his cards do hold a little more weight. There are less graded in a 10 at only 1,092, and they're going for $340. And at one point, that is a humongous steal, and at some point maybe it still is a steal, and I'd be curious to see if Kawhi has a second life, or Anthony Davis. Either of these guys, do either of them have a second life in the NBA where these cards could see a resurgence in price? Again, the facts are there's 2,500 of these graded, 1,200 about in a PSA 9, almost 1,100 in a PSA 10. The one thing you notice about both these cards, if you're a vintage collector or a collector of the past, is that there are very few cards compared in an 8, 7, 6. That's just funny, and a big difference if you're collecting cards and looking at PSA pop counts from 70s, 80s, 90s. I hope for Kawhi Leonard and Anthony Davis, at least one of them has a second life in the NBA, and you'd think it'd be easier for Kawhi. I mean, it just seems like Anthony Davis' body is giving out on him, but Kawhi's not a small dude either. Go in and write in the comments, what do you think? Who has a better chance at having a second life in the NBA? Kawhi Leonard or Anthony Davis? Again, both drafted here in 2012, both playing in LA. I'd love to see either one of them. Being a Laker fan, I'd love to see Davis, but I have little faith that he will ever be healthy for an extended period of time. Just take one last look again. 2,500 copies for Kawhi, a little over 1,000 in a 10 going for $340. Let's take one last look again at the Anthony Davis. 2,800 card copy, rounding up just a bit. 1,600 in a PSA 10 going for $200. One last thing I want to point out before we move on is that it's kind of relative. There's a 1,600 PSA 10s going for $200 for the Anthony Davis. The Kawhi Leonard here, 1,100 with 500 less copies, and it's going for $340. Yeah, a third less copies, and it's going for about a third more. It's funny to think Giannis was only drafted a year after both those guys. Seems like those guys are ancient in the league, and Giannis is so much more of the new thing. But both the trajectories of those players, Anthony Davis to Kawhi Leonard, to what Giannis is completely different. And Giannis, out of all the cards we're going to look at here, probably is the best talent of this decade. We're going to have Luka fall in there and Ja are a little more recent. But, Giannis here, we're looking at about 5,000 cards graded, 4,499 at a pop count of PSA 10. 2,800. That's a lot different. That's a lot more, both in total graded and PSA 10. However, that PSA 10 holds a grade of $1,000. So while there's double the amount, more than double of the Giannis versus the Kawhi Leonard, again, the trajectory, the way people are collecting these players are completely different. Quick fun thought, would you rather have one PSA 10 Giannis with 2,800 copies, or you could buy 3 Kawhis at that same price in a PSA 10, because they were going roughly for about $330 each, and the pop count is much less. There's only about 1,100 of those PSA 10s, where there's 2,800 of these Giannis's. Now, I'm not saying that's a smart move. I'm just proposing the question. Giannis clearly seems to have the upper hand when it comes to the next 5 to 10 years in the league. Moving forward, let's take a look at Giannis's Silver Prism. Now, remember, it's only the second year Prism's been released, and you see the pop count on the Silver is very, very low. Only 177 total graded, 77 in a PSA 10. That's under 100 copies, and you're looking at that card going for over $14,000 currently right now in a semi-down market. I say semi-down because who knows what the bottom is and how low it can go and where this card's going to go. But again, it's a very low pop count, and that correlates to a very nice high price, seeing he is probably the guy to collect outside of maybe Luka, and Luka's pop counts you're going to see are not looking what Giannis's do. I want to point out here that the Silver is going for $14,000 more than the 9 at $6,500. This card is out of reach for many people, where the base card at a 10 or 9, the 10 going for $1,000, the 9 going for $500. That's still out of reach for a lot of people, but it's more feasible. A lot of people can get that in the collection, where this is just on another level, at least at the moment. So moving forward to the next year, we have 2014 Prism Joel Embiid's rookie. And his pop counts are not much different than what we saw with the 2012 players, and Embiid is maybe not as graded as someone like Giannis. Anyhow, there are 1,500 cards out there in a PSA 10 going for $185. In a PSA 9, $60 gets you a Joel Embiid, about a little over 1,100 in a PSA 9. We go back and take a look at the Kawhi, 2,500 copies, and Joel Embiid had 2,800 copies. Speaking of 2,800 copies, right here, Anthony Davis, same exact. Well, Embiid had 1,500 in a PSA 10, Anthony Davis 1,600 in a PSA 10. Now pay attention, these cards they all have less than 3,000 copies graded. Giannis's card, 4,500 graded. Just keep that in mind in the back of your head. Cards, if you like what you see so far, give a like and subscribe. It would help out a lot growing the channel, helping the algorithm. Here's the Joel Embiid Silver. You see it's very low pop count, only 79 to PSA 10, going for $890. Here's the last sale I could find back in late December or mid-December of 2022, going for about $880 there. You can compare it to the Giannis, similar pop count, but look how much more the Giannis goes for, and that just tells you where those two players stand in collector's eyes. Devin Booker here is our 2015 Prism player. The pop count at 4,000, so sitting in between all the different players. 1,800 in a PSA 10 and going for $200 there. 1,900 in a PSA 9, $55. Again, about 4,000, a little over 4,000 graded total. Here's Booker's Silver card, and there's a little more in the pop count, 382, but still his PSA 10, $199, going for $1,000. Pushing forward, Jaylen Brown is 2016 player. There's less of his in the pop count, and I would imagine that's because he's maybe not on the same level as a Kawhi Leonard or Giannis. 1,800 cards graded, 955 in a PSA 10, going for $105. Of all these players, that stands out as a current steal, but again, that's just an opinion. Here is his Silver Prism, only 321 total. He compares the Devin Booker with 382 total. The Booker you see in a 10 is going for $1,000, 199 copies, while the Jaylen Brown, about the same amount of copies, 253, only going for $325. So people are respecting that Devin Booker card more than the Jaylen Brown card, at least at the moment. And this is a fun exercise because Jaylen Brown is a year younger, or at least a year less in the league than Devin Booker. The very next year, the Boston Celtics draft Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown's teammate, and they've already been to one championship. How many more can they go to? Jaylen Brown only had 1,800 pop count. Devin Booker, a little over 4,000 pop count. Joel Embiid, pushing 3,000 PSA pop count. Giannis has 4,500 cards graded, shows in the left corner there. And now Jason Tatum, you see that's where the big jump is, 12,300. Now, you can still respect that card, 6,000 in a PSA 10, and it's still going for $200, but that's just too many in a PSA 10, and comparing to the previous years, that's the big jump. 2016 to 2017, there are way more cards graded, probably more cards, definitely more cards printed, more cards in circulation. It's going to bring down that price. Here's Jason Tatum Silver, and it still holds a nice price. Again, you can see that the pop is much higher, 1,300 cards. Earlier, Devin Booker was the highest with 382 that we looked at. Tatum Silver has 1,300, 782 in a PSA 10, but holds a great price, and that just shows where collectors are with Jason Tatum at the moment. His card going for $1,250 in a PSA 10, even though there's 782 copies. Here's Luka going to 2018. Again, you see a huge jump. Bottom left corner, 35,000 of these graded. That's right. It jumped from Tatum at 12,000. The previous players, Giannis has 4,500, and now here's Luka with 30,000 more cards graded than Giannis. You didn't hear that wrong. Luka has 30,000 more cards in a PSA graded rookie cards than Giannis. Luka has over 19,000 cards graded in a PSA 10, while Giannis only has 2,800 graded in a PSA 10. Let's look at Luka's Silver. Same thing, almost 5,000 total graded, over 2,000 a PSA 10. Still holds a nice price at $2,100. The closest comparison in the cards we've looked at is Jason Tatum with 1,300 total cards graded, 782 in a 10, and $1,200 price tag, whereas Luka, 2,100 and cards graded and in a 10 and $2,100 price tag. Ja Morant 2019 Prism. It's just a shame that he has so many of these graded. Really, between Ja and Luka, you're looking at the future of the NBA right there, and their pop counts are just so high. This is very similar to Luka's 39,000 total graded, 21,000 in a PSA 10, and go out and get yourself a Ja Morant. Even though it's ridiculously high, that price might keep falling. That's a great card to have in anyone's collection, and a reasonable price to go get. Even in a PSA 9 or 8, treat yourself to a Ja PSA 10 Prism. Here's the Silver. And again, you see that pop count just continuing to rise as the years go. Now you have almost 1,500 graded in a PSA 10, still selling at $1,000. And if you got the money, go get a PSA 9, 2,500 for $225. I'm not big on modern or ultra modern, I'm really not, but Ja's going to have a nice future, and to have one of his premier cards would be a lot of fun to root for over the next 10 years. So again, don't break the bank for it, don't hurt yourself, but out of all the cards we've looked at, this would be a fun card to own, and it's cheaper than the Luka. Now we're going to stop here at 2020. I'll do more current decade or the current years in a future video. Here's Anthony Edwards, only 5,000 graded. Now, again, that's why I can't really do some of these newer years. People are still pulling these packs. People are still getting these cards graded. And most of all, people probably don't find it profitable or tempting to grade this right now. 5,000 total copies. In a 10, there's almost 2,000. Only sells for $70. So you're going to pay a $30, $25 fee plus buying the card itself. And if you get a PSA 9, it's not even worth it to grade it. I'm not talking investment, I'm just talking for fun. Having a PSA 9 silver for $100 of Anthony Edwards and rooting for him in his career sounds like a steal compared to buying a $300 hobby box. Some of the trends that we see here is the pop count continues to grow. In 2012, you're looking at about 2,500 for each of these players, total graded. And then it just continues to grow from there. 5,000 for Giannis, almost 3,000 for Embiid. So in the early years, you're looking at 3,000 to 5,000. Booker, 4,100. Then you say a huge jump. It's amazing the difference a year can make. Jaylen Brown having only 1,800 graded, and then Jason Tatum just a year later at 12,000. One more year in the future, and Luka, and it's just a shame because what a stud, is at 35,000, and then Ja at 39,000. It gets bigger and bigger every year. What I gather from this is these newer Prism cards, the silver is the way to go because the base card is just entirely way too overpopulated.
What up, everybody? This is Robert Ory, aka Big Shot Bob, and you're watching Professional Sports Cards. Hey, by the way, go buy my rookie card.